Condition after fall of Mughal Empire. Effects of the War of Independence. The failure of 1857 was a seminal event in the history of Indian subcontinent. It was the harbinger of the close of an era and the beginning of a new one in the history of colonial India. A number of significant changes in administrative structure in Britain were introduced, along with change in the policies of the government of India and the British territories. India comes under the British crown. On November 1, 1858, a durbar was held by Lord Canning, first Viceroy, at the Allahabad to declare the assumption of the government of India by the crown. On that occasion, Lord Canning also had read out the Queen's proclamation to the princes and people of India. By this proclamation, the administration of India was transferred from East India Company to the British Crown. The Queen's principal Secretary of State received the power and duties of Company's Court of Directors. A council of 15 members was appointed to assist the Secretary of State for India. The council became an advisory body in the India affairs. The Sepoy Rebellion or Indian Mutiny, the culmination of growing resentment and anger toward the British and their policies, marked a turning point in the subcontinent history. Policy of territorial extension. The policy of territorial extension was abandoned by the British, and the native Indian rulers were assured of the safety of their territories. Honor and rights. The right of the native ruler of adopting a child in the absence of a natural heir was also accepted by the British government. The Talukdar of Awadh were also restored and given back their lands. The British felt that the native ruler and the landed aristocracy would prove strong pillar of the empire. It therefore became a part of the policy that all conservative and reactionary forces in the Indian society were to be protected by the government to serve as a bulwark against the people. At the same time, the theory of one char, that is, India was to be treated as one political unit for administrative purposes, and the Crown of England was the unquestioned ruler and permanent power in India, was frankly asserted and implemented. Change structure of Indian Army. The pattern of organization of the Indian Army, which was the strongest pillar of the British rule in India, was changed. Firstly, the proportion of the British soldiers were increased and they were equipped with the best armies. Secondly, the policy of the counterpoise of natives against natives was to be pursued in case of army as well. Therefore, the Indians were divided into martial and non-martial races, and regiments were raised on caste, religious, or regional basis. The Sheikh Regiment, the Jat Regiment, the Gurkha Regiment, etc. Indian Civil Service Act 1861. The second pillar of imperial strength, the monopoly of higher services by the Englishmen, was kept intact. The Indian Civil Service Act of 1861 admittedly provided for an annual competitive examination for recruitment to the convened civil service, but the venue of examination was kept in London. Besides, the detailed rules concerning it were so framed that the Indians were virtually kept aloof from the service. Till 1920, therefore, the number of Indians in higher services remained pecuniary. Escalation of bitterness. The period after the revolt of 1857 was marked with the escalation of bitterness and racial hatred, particularly on part of the English. The Indians on the part also remained hostile toward their ruler for many years to come. The era of liberalism and humanitarianism was already over in Britain by 1860. The revolt gave it a coup de grace. The attitude to rule India by power became predominant and continued to affect the policies of the government of India. All social power became predominant and continued to affect the policies of government of India. All social power became All social and educational reform policies were abandoned by the British. Even the education of English was Even the education of English was neglected because that could enlighten the Indians, which ultimately could harm the imperial interests. On the contrary, orthodoxy, religious superstition, caste, communal, and regional differences were instigated. Of course, it was realized that the lack of contact between the rulers and the ruled was harmful to the imperial interest, and therefore a beginning was made toward the development of representative institution by the Indian Council Act of 1861, but it was not with the purpose of educating the Indians in the working of representative institution, but to devise a way for establishing the British rule permanently in India. The entire structure of Indian administration was so modeled that it might ensure the perpetuation of the British rule. Economic exploitation. The post-revolt period also witnessed further economic exploitation of the Indians. Of course, certain beneficial measures for the subject like development of transport and communication, agriculture and irrigation, sanitation, etc. were attempted by the British, but the motive of economic profit was never lost by British. It was rather further infuriated. Policy of divide and rule. After the failure of 1857 war, the British actively pursued the policy of divide and rule towards the general populace. Two opposite policies were at work while on one hand India was being brought under a unified system of administration and governance, on the other for political necessity. Indian diversity was highlighted in order to depict the claims and needs of different sections as divergent. Tyranny against Muslims. The British wrath fell largely upon Muslims. The Muslims were the vanguards of the 1857 war and often had to face in combat fellow Indians in the British army ranks. For Muslims, 1857 uprising was but a continuation of the campaign by Sayyid Ahmad Shahid to save the Muslims from subjugation. The chicanery of Hindus made the British believe that the revolt was instigated primarily by the Muslims. When the spoils hailed the Mughal emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar as emperor of Hindustan, consequently the British were tyrannous toward the Muslim. It was only the governor-general relationship of Lord Mayo and with the publication of Sir William Hunter book, The Indian Muslims in 1871, that the British government undertook some measure to ameliorate the condition of Muslims. Sir Syed also witnessed the events firsthand. His writing, especially Risala Asbab Bagawat-e-Hind, Tarikh-e-Bijnor and Loyal Muhammadans of India, have invaluable information, though his portrayal of the freedom fighter was that of unruly bandits revolting against magnanimous rulers. In the aftermath of the revolt, India was made to bear the entire financial burden of the outbreak and suppression of the revolt. The public debt of India increased approximately by 98 million pound, which in turn added to the annual interest charges by 2 million pound.